All right, guys, here we go. Pregame.com. I'm Sleepy J. Got Uncle Dave on the podcast. We're going to talk some golf betting 101. I'm going to ask Uncle Dave some basic questions for those of you who have followed Uncle Dave at pregame.com or you followed Uncle Dave on Twitter. You know he's pretty big with the golf betting, and he's probably no one other that I'd rather talk to go ahead and start learning how to bet golf. So for those of you guys who are looking for golf betting advice, we're going to go ahead. We're going to lean on Uncle Dave here. Uncle Dave, I have a few questions here lined up. Let's do some basic stuff here, Uncle Dave. Why don't you go ahead and tell us, what type of wagers we can bet on in golf?
Well, I mean, you can obviously bet on who's going to win the tournament, and that seems to be, that's the biggest payout. So I think people tend to want to migrate to that. But you can bet on where they're going to finish: top 10, top 20, top 30, make or miss the cut. They have head-to-heads. DJ against Rory or whatever. They'll set their odds, and you can. There's a lot of prop bets, hole-in-one type things. And you can bet on almost anything you want to bet on in a golf tournament.
All right, so it sounds like we have a decent menu of bets that we can make here, Uncle Dave. How about some long shot wagers, long shot props, hole in one, maybe albatross? How would you go ahead and handicap those? Or a better question, are they even worth betting?
Well, I think some are and some aren't. The hole in one prop is an interesting one. Of course, we're coming off a week where there were at least two holes in ones in Orlando, but that's the anomaly. And I don't bet those, and I'll tell you why. You know, for example, a hole in one. Looking at the TPC coming up this week, hole in one in either of the first two rounds is plus 250. Well, the reality of the situation is, I think a PGA golfer's chances of a hole in one are roughly 3,000 to one. So is there really value in betting plus 250 when it should be so much higher? No, of course not. But, and a no is minus 375. So you're obviously gonna get killed trying to bet that. So I don't bet those hole in one sort of oddball props. The return is good, but the risk is high. I mean, I look at that Sleepy like a safety in the Super Bowl. The odds are slim to none that it's going to happen, and if it does, the payout isn't nearly what it should be. So I try to avoid those ridiculous ones, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they sound like they're harder bets to make, but at least you feel like you have something to root for each and every golfer that steps up to the tee box to go ahead and cash those tickets. Now, for those of you who've been following Uncle Dave, and for those of you who have not, if this is your first time listening, Uncle Dave's been very successful, with a run of picking winners over the last couple of years. And these tickets, they often return some really good prices. And the odds, typically you're going to get anywhere from like 10 to 1 for a winner, maybe all the way up to, 200 to 1 for some of your long shots. So, Uncle Dave, why don't you go ahead and give me a basic breakdown of, what you look for to go ahead and bet on a guy to go ahead and win an individual tournament?
Well, I look for value, Sleepy, and it's not unlike, betting a basketball game. I'm looking for the guy that's playing well, but not, he's kind of flying under the radar, if you will. A guy that finishes well the previous tournament. Maybe he barely made the cut and, he shot a couple of really good rounds, so he's in really good form. And I'm looking for a guy that has maybe historically played well on this particular course, that maybe isn't in really good form right now, because those are the guys that you're going to get the best value on. And by value, I'm looking at, something north of 25 to 1 really is what I would like to be. I mean, it's easy to pick the chalk, and that's usually not where the money's found. So I'm looking for value. I'm looking for, the books have to throw up a ton of numbers, and they just kind of pick and choose. And, much like a Saturday college basketball card, you'll find some mistakes in there, or some value. I should say mistakes would be knowing the outcome beforehand, but obviously that's not the case. So for me, it's finding the guy that people aren't really talking about, that's had some pretty good stats recently, but maybe not like on TV on Sunday afternoon, but certainly more than capable. Those are the guys I'm looking to cash winners on.
All right, so let's circle back to a couple of the wagers that you had mentioned. You obviously talked about the winners just now, but you mentioned that we can go ahead, we can make, top 5, top 10, 20, 30. They would be different wagers from our winners. Are you not that confident in these because you're not picking those guys to win? Are they made based on price? How are you going ahead and differentiating, the difference between your winners and then your top fives to top 40s?
Sleepy, that's a really good question. And for our listeners' sake, I didn't see these questions but maybe 5 minutes before we started recording this, because to pick a guy to win, I will typically pick two or three guys to win because it's kind of cool. But I'll spread the risk around because I think it's much easier to find a guy that might finish top 30. Reason being, the margin for error is quite slim. Typically the leader wins by one stroke. And if you look at this past week with Bryson and Lee Westwood, well, Bryson won, and it kind of felt like he lapped the field. But if Westwood doesn't miss a couple of short putts, that's going into overtime. So the margin for error to actually win a tournament is really small, and the odds are not really reflective of that, for the chalky type guy. So I find a lot more value in finding the guys that I'm pretty confident are going to A, make the cut, and B, play well enough to sort of be somewhere on the leaderboard in the top 20 or 30 on the weekend. Does it pay as much? No, but goes back to this week we have DJ as the chalk at 12 to 1. Well, there's any number of guys that can beat him, but if you really like DJ, is there really more value in betting him sort of a top 10 at plus 150? For me, probably, because what I'm looking to do going into a tournament is spread the risk around. If I'm going to bet $3,000, I'm going to make $3,000 bets. I want plus money on most of them, and I want to cash half of them. So to find a guy to win is really hard. And to find a guy to win that pays a good price is even harder. So I do find more value in the top 30s and above for any tournament, really.
All right. Well, it certainly sounds like, with the wagers we had mentioned, we can certainly have, interesting weeks going ahead and betting golf. Now, you had mentioned make to miss the cut there. How would you handicap a guy to go ahead and make the cut or miss the cut?
That's hard. I actually had one this past week that I felt pretty good about. That I played a guy to make the cut, and I don't normally do that. I like to play guys to miss the cut. To make the cut, miss the cut. To me, there's not a ton of value. I'm not saying they're not solid bets, but if you're going to take a guy like Rory or DJ or somebody solid that you are pretty convinced is going to make the cut. I think DJ's made 9 of 9 this year. You're going to pay for it. To make the cut is like minus 450. I'm not going to do that because it's kind of like, look at that, like baseball. Like you got that pitcher that's like minus 400, and okay, well, in the first inning he tweaks an elbow, comes out and needs Tommy John surgery. Well, there goes your minus 450. So get a guy like Patrick Reed at some really good, minus three, minus 350 price to make the cut, and he 6 holes into it he tweaks his back, which is he's been prone to do. Well, there goes your money. So I would find more value in those guys in betting them not to make the cut. I'm not saying I wouldn't bet DJ not to make the cut. Odds are he will, but you're going to pay dearly for it. I think you're better off, and this kind of goes back to finding the undervalued guy. You can find some that are minus 150 plus 110 type things that there might be a little value in, and it's finding the guy that has played well on this course or this type of course and is playing reasonably well leading up to this course. So those are the ones that for sure I find value in the lesser known guys and none in the top guys because it's just too expensive to bet them to make the cut. It doesn't pay enough to bet them not to make the cut. The hold on those bets is a huge number, and there's just no value in it. So yeah, there's value in it, but I think the value there is playing the guys that I won't say nobody's heard of, but a lot of people haven't heard of.
All right, solid information with that. You had mentioned first round leader. How would you go about handicapping that? Is that just the guy that ends up with the lead, after the first round? Is that how that bet particularly works?
Well, that's exactly right, Sleepy, and that's a quick and dirty one, and that's another one where you can cash some really big tickets. More often than not, the first round leader is going to be somebody that might not be around Sunday. Look at Connors last week. I don't know what his odds were to lead first round, but they were pretty astronomical, and he had a great tournament. No disrespect at all, but those are the type of guys you want to try to find that are going to go out and potentially shoot low that maybe they can't shoot low for 4 days, and that's why they're 100 to 1 to win the tournament. Or maybe I'll play a guy like a chalk guy, like last week. There's value in that first round to where, this upcoming week, and you have DJ at 12 to 1 to win the tournament. Well, he's got to play 72 good holes, but to lead after round one is plus 2,500. So he's only got to shoot one really good round. And so that's where I do find the value. Now, granted, because anybody can shoot a 63 from DJ to the 200 ranked guy on tour. It's harder to find that guy, but I think there's more value in finding that guy. And again, it just goes to who you can look on PGA.com and find out who typically plays well in the first round. You can find who putts well in the first round and just break it down and combine it with, well, he's played well over this course. He's playing reasonably well. Nobody knows about him. He's 50 to 1. Hey, let's do it. So it's almost like the microcosm of betting who's going to win, only you're only betting who's going to do it for one day.
All right, solid sound advice there. They sound rather interesting. I like the fact that you don't have to wait the entire tournament to go ahead and cash a ticket. I think that, a lot of the, novice bettors, the guys who were just going ahead and jumping into golf betting, would enjoy that rather well. Now, you mentioned head to heads, Uncle Dave. I bet those quite often. But for our listeners, why don't you explain exactly, what a head to head is and how you would actually go ahead and handicap that type of wager?
Well, head to head is strictly that, golfer A against golfer B, Colin Morikawa against Xander Schauffele, and they'll post odds on who's going to win. And you can find a good bit of value in those. I don't play a lot of them, and the only reason I don't is because it just takes so much time, and there's only so many hours in a day. But again, that would be finding the guy that has played well or is playing well against the guy that everybody's heard of. Oftentimes you can find some really good plus money matchups on those things, strictly based on who is playing well at the time. That's a bet that is extrapolating out one further than to make or miss the cut, because obviously, if your guy misses the cut, you're probably not going to win that bet unless both guys miss the cut. It's all kind of related, if you will, and it goes into time. So for example, if I really like a guy to make the cut, I'm going to go back and look and see who they've put him with at a head-to-head, and I would be inclined to take that guy in that head-to-head matchup. Now, interestingly enough, the books tend to put like-minded guys together, if you will. So I can't tell you how many times I've liked two guys, and of course they pitted them against each other, and then it's like, well, okay, well, I'm not going to bet that because there's no value. It all follows like a really logical progression, probably more so than any other handicapping that I do. When I start out in the beginning of the week, I'll go through and I'll find 8 or 10 guys that played well last week, 8 or 10 guys that have played well on this course, and write them all down, and then cross a few off and circle a bunch, and then go and look at least where I think they're going to be come Sunday night. Hopefully, they are playing on the weekend. To make miscut and head to heads, they're, in my mind, they're similar in that if I think he's going to play well, I think he's going to make the cut. So I think he's going to win a head to head. And that's where how I get to those bets. It's strictly a logical progression. No, it's the one sport where you can really totally use logic in arriving at these things. And if you start in the beginning and work all the way to the end, the bets almost come to you rather than you going, oh, I think Shoffley's going to play well this week. Well, I don't make any of those bets on I think. They're all based on sort of historical probability and current form, just like any other bet we would make in any other sport.
All right, great information there, Uncle Dave. I particularly, I like those head to heads. I like them quite a bit. Before we jump into our final question here, Uncle Dave, with live betting in golf, I do want to ask you a quick question here, though. For those people who are going out and they're trying to go ahead and do their own handicapping, look up, a lot of the information that you're going ahead and saying, that you should go ahead and out there and find. Where would you particularly go ahead and direct some of the people to go ahead and look, for that information? What's a really good site for people to go ahead and start doing their, first time basic golf handicapping?
Well, that's one that I think you don't want to overthink the problem. PGA.com. I like that site because it has everything I need, and I think what is really good about it. I mean, you can look at stats. You can look at how he putts in the first round in putts 2 to 8 feet. I mean, they really have a lot of detail. But also on there, if you click a particular tournament, click TPC, click Masters, whatever you want, you just go right up the top to history and past results. And very quickly, 2020, 2019, you can go through the last 3 years and get the entire leaderboard in about 8 seconds, depending on your speed of your computer. I mean, it's really all kind of right there, and it'll show you how they did each round in each year. So I don't think you really need to go much further than PGA.com, and that's about the only one I use. That and the eyeball test from watching them Sunday afternoon, I think, is really all you probably need to be able to make reasonably sound bets.
All right, so there you go, guys. PGA.com. Let's wrap this up here, Uncle Dave, with live golf betting. What are some of the things that you do, or that or that you at least try to avoid when it comes to live betting golf?
Well, live betting golf is interesting for me in that it's not unlike live betting a basketball game. Only you have a lot more time. I don't. I make my live betting like, okay, it's after the first round and before the second round, so I have 18 hours to figure it out, as opposed to, shoot, it's a halftime bet. I have about 4 minutes before that line's gone, and what I look for, a great example, and we use this, I think, on one of our podcasts recently, is you almost kind of have to have an idea of what you want to do before you do it. Like using the chalk guy, like last week we used Rory as an example at being, I think, 9-1 to win the tournament, and I would have never bet 9-1. It's just the return isn't really enough. I mean, it would have sucked to win 9-1, but I think we can do better. And as fate would have it, he didn't win. But what you could get him for at the end of the first round. Now he led after the first round, so it wouldn't have been great. But I would look for a guy like that to have a marginal first round. Be 4 or 5 strokes off, and then maybe you can get him 15 or 20 to 1. So that's where I find a lot of value in. And also after the second round, you might, that's especially in the bigger tournaments like TPC or the majors. You almost know the guys at the leaderboard on Thursday for certain are probably not going to be there Sunday afternoon, and even Fridays as well. So then you're looking for a guy, like Justin Thomas or Xander or Webb Simpson, or somebody that might have been 18 or 20 to 1 to win the tournament, and he made the cut, but he's only 4 shots back, and there might be 8 guys between them. So for a guy like that to go out and shoot a couple 66s and win is not out of the question. At the beginning of the tournament, you might have got him 20 to 1. You might could get him 40 to 1 now. So what I'm looking for, just like in a basketball in-game or halftime bet, I'm looking to get better odds now at a not unrealistic outcome than I could have got before the tournament. Live betting during the tournament. There is one time when I will do that, and if you're paying attention, the weather is always a huge factor. I think we've talked about it plenty of times. I like first round leaders that go off early before the weather kicks up, and oftentimes you'll see the weather kick up for the afternoon round. So if you're seeing a guy that's marginal, and it's going to be like 15 to 20 in the afternoon, and he's teeing off at 2 o'clock, I would be inclined to bet him to miss the cut. And obviously the reverse is true, but the weather's a big deal. Oftentimes you'll see, it's going to rain from noon to 2. Well, there's going to be a delay. Well, I might want to take a guy to miss the cut that maybe would have played 4 holes, has to rest for 2 hours, and then play more. So there are situations where I would do, during the day bets, but they would be mostly predicated on weather, and obviously you gotta kind of have a plan ahead of time for that as well.
I personally love that angle there, Uncle Dave, when it comes to going ahead and live betting. I think that there's certainly opportunities out there, as you had mentioned, where a guy's not out of the picture. He's certainly in the picture. And, the beginning odds told us, that this guy was predicted to be here, and now he's sitting here. Well, when you look at the winner odds, Uncle Dave, I think one of the things that the sports books don't tell you is, where a guy's going to be after the second round. And some people might get discouraged that, you got your guy sitting there, like you had mentioned, with like, maybe 7, 8, 9 guys, between him and the top of the leaderboard. They're going to offer so much better odds. So I particularly like that, quite a bit, maybe going ahead and attacking, things that way as well. Well, big thanks there to Uncle Dave for going ahead and jumping in here on this Golf Betting 101 podcast. Certainly want to go ahead and say thanks to Uncle Dave. You guys can find Uncle Dave at pregame.com, or you can find him on Twitter at Dave_Essler. And make sure you come back to pregame.com for more Betting 101.